Every worst car from the 1960s. Engines that overheated before the warranty paperwork dried. Suspensions that made highways feel like minefields. One that triggered a congressional investigation and changed American law forever. This was the golden age of American automotive ambition. Chrome and displacement, and advertising copy written by people who understood theater better than engineering. And underneath all of it, some of the most dangerous and dishonest vehicles ever bolted together on American soil. Let us count them down. Starting our countdown at number 10, the Oldsmobile Jetstar 88. It was produced from 1964 to 1966. Oldsmobile had built genuine credibility with the 88 nameplate across the previous decade. The Jetstar arrived as a budget entry, positioned to capture buyers who wanted the Oldsmobile badge without the Oldsmobile price. The 330 cubic inch V8 produced around 260 horsepower. Those numbers looked acceptable until you sat beside a comparable Chevrolet or Ford, offering more displacement and more refinement for less money. Interior materials reflected the cost-cutting mandate with clarity. Fabrics wore quickly, plastics cracked ahead of schedule. Rust developed along lower body panels with a speed that suggested factory primers had been applied with optimism rather than preparation. The Jetstar was discontinued after 3 model years, one of the shortest production runs in Oldsmobile history, because even General Motors recognized that a product built to undercut its own lineup had succeeded only at undermining the brand that produced it. Number 9 is the Studebaker Avanti, produced from 1962 to 1963. Studebaker arrived in the 1960s already wounded. The Avanti was dramatic. Raymond Loewy's design was genuinely striking. The supercharged 289 cubic inch V8 in R2 configuration produced around 289 horsepower. Road testers recorded genuine speed records at Bonneville. The problem was everything surrounding the performance. Fiberglass body production was inconsistent. Panel fit varied between vehicles in ways that quality control should have rejected. The bodies required hand-fitting at the factory because manufacturing tolerances were insufficient to guarantee consistency. Interior quality failed to justify the premium pricing. Studebaker's financial instability created legitimate concerns about parts availability and warranty support that no advertising could resolve. The Avanti was discontinued when Studebaker shuttered its South Bend plant in late 1963. A car that could have saved a company arrived too late, at too high a cost, with too many unresolved quality issues to achieve what Studebaker needed. Number 8. The Ford Galaxie 500 XL with the base inline 6. It was produced from 1962 to 1964. The Galaxie earned genuine respect in V8 configuration. The problem was what Ford sold underneath the nameplate to buyers who did not read the specification sheet. The base inline 6 produced around 138 horsepower in a vehicle weighing nearly 2 tons. Highway passing required planning that bordered on prayer. The mismatch between the Galaxie's premium positioning and its base powertrain was not subtle. It was measurable in seconds and felt in every attempt at meaningful acceleration. Fuel economy did not compensate for the performance deficit. A large, heavy car with an undersized engine delivered neither the performance of a proper V8 nor the efficiency that might justify the compromise. Ford sold the base 6 because it allowed a lower advertised entry price. Buyers who purchased it discovered the gap between the entry price and the ownership experience exceeded what any reasonable transaction should permit. Number 7. The AMC Marlin was produced from 1965 to 1967. American Motors arrived at the fastback segment at precisely the moment Ford's Mustang had demonstrated the market's appetite for sporting personal transportation. The Marlin was AMC's answer. The answer was unconvincing. The 232 cubic inch inline 6 produced around 145 horsepower in base form. The Marlin had been developed from the Rambler Classic platform, meaning the wheelbase and body architecture were designed for a family sedan rather than a sporting coupe. The fastback roofline was grafted onto proportions that did not invite it. Rear seat headroom was compromised severely, making a car built on a family sedan platform less practical than the sedan it was derived from, without delivering the sporting character that justified the sacrifice. The Marlin sold poorly across all 3 model years. AMC replaced it with the Javelin, a direct admission that the Marlin had not accomplished what it was designed to do. If you are enjoying this video so far, like and subscribe. It really helps us grow. Now back to the video. Number 6 is the Chrysler Imperial with torque flight push-button issues. Produced from 1960 to 1963, the Imperial was Chrysler's answer to Cadillac, a fully separate brand positioned at the absolute top of the American luxury hierarchy. The 413 cubic inch V8 produced around 340 horsepower. The problems arrived through the push-button transmission selector mounted on the dashboard, positioned as a demonstration of modernity. In practice, the system developed dangerous faults. Buttons became unresponsive. Selections failed to engage the intended gear. Owners reported engaging reverse when forward motion was intended. Electrical connections behind the dashboard corroded and failed in ways dealer technicians found difficult to diagnose. Body quality was inconsistent in ways that Cadillac's more controlled manufacturing avoided. A car priced above Cadillac and positioned as the finest American luxury engineering could not afford the quality inconsistencies that appeared with regularity. We are only halfway through because the next cars on this list did more than disappoint wealthy buyers. They triggered federal legislation. They killed people, and they forced an industry that had operated without meaningful external accountability to confront the consequences of that freedom. Continuing with number 5, the General Motors A-body intermediates suffered from drum brake inadequacy. This includes the Chevelle, the Buick Skylark, the Oldsmobile Cutlass, and the Pontiac Tempest from 1964 to 1967. General Motors had invested heavily in making these vehicles powerful and stylistically competitive. The engineering resources devoted to making them fast had not been proportionally applied to making them stop. Four-wheel drum brakes on vehicles that could exceed 100 miles per hour created a fundamental mismatch between the acceleration capability advertising celebrated and the braking capability safety required. Fade under repeated hard application was not a worst-case scenario. It was a documented characteristic owners encountered in normal driving. Disky brakes were available technology. European manufacturers had been applying them to performance vehicles for years. General Motors made them optional on some models late in the period, and standard on none. The decision was financial. Drum brakes cost less. The cost of that decision was absorbed by owners who discovered the limitation at moments when discovery was irreversible. Number 4 is the Chevrolet Corvair, produced from 1960 to 1963 in its most problematic form. It was genuinely innovative, a rear-engine, air-cooled American compact that offered something no domestic manufacturer had attempted at volume. Its swing-axle rear suspension geometry created a tendency toward snap oversteer, a dangerous trait drivers received no warning about and were not trained to handle. General Motors had internal engineering analysis questioning the suspension's safety before the car reached production, but the findings were not acted upon with the urgency they warranted. Ralph Nader documented the problem in Unsafe at Any Speed in 1965. Congressional hearings followed. The National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act of 1966 created federal safety standards for automobiles for the first time in American history. General Motors then hired private investigators to surveil and discredit Ralph Nader personally. When that response was revealed publicly, it amplified the legislative consequence rather than containing it. The Corvair story is the story of how an industry lost the right to regulate itself. Number 3 is the Ford Thunderbird 4th generation. It was produced from 1961 to 1963. The styling was genuinely elegant. The 390 cubic inch V8 produced around 300 horsepower. But the problems accumulated in the details, where Ford's cost management had compromised quality. Electrical systems proved unreliable, and power window mechanisms failed regularly. The retractable convertible top developed faults that required dealer service at intervals owners found unacceptable for a premium vehicle. Body sealing was inconsistent. Water intrusion through door seals was documented extensively. Rust developed along lower body structures in northern climates with a speed that suggested inadequate rust-proofing during assembly. Interior materials wore and discolored within the first year of ownership. A car positioned as America's premier personal luxury vehicle needed to deliver through the ownership experience, not only at the point of sale. The 4th generation Thunderbird delivered the showroom promise and compromised everything that followed. Number 2 is the Plymouth Valiant Signet, with cooling system failures. produced from 1962 to 1966. Chrysler's compact Valiant had earned genuine respect for the durability of its 225 cubic inch slant 6. The Signet trim level added interior upgrades and exterior brightwork that justified a higher price. The problems were not with the engine's fundamental design, but with the cooling system calibration on early production vehicles. Overheating developed in warm climates and in stop-and-go traffic, because the system had not been adequately calibrated to manage those conditions. Thermostat failures were more common than the mechanical simplicity of the engine suggested they should be. Electrical accessories added for the Signet specification introduced failure points that the base Valiant avoided. Interior quality improvements promised by the Signet trim were inconsistent in delivery. A car that traded on its parent model's reputation for mechanical honesty often delivered reliability that did not match that reputation or the premium it commanded. But the worst American car story of the 1960s was not a single model. It was a single philosophy applied across tens of millions of vehicles simultaneously. Number 1 is the General Motors full-size vehicle brake engineering decisions across Chevrolet, Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac from 1965 to 1969. General Motors controlled approximately 50% of the American automotive market. That market share made the engineering choices made in Warren, Michigan, more consequential than those of any other private company in the country. Vehicles that left the factory producing 300, 350, and 400 horsepower were stopped by four-wheel drum systems designed for cars producing roughly half that output. The fade characteristics of those systems under sustained hard use were documented internally. The cost of upgrading them was calculated internally. The decision to maintain existing systems was made internally and defended publicly with language that characterized them as adequate for normal driving conditions. Normal driving conditions included the interstate highway system, which was being built specifically to accommodate the higher speeds these engines made routine. The gap between what General Motors knew about its brake systems and what it communicated to buyers was not produced by ignorance. It was produced by calculation. The cost of improvement exceeded the calculated cost of consequence. That calculation, applied across 50% of the American automotive market, affected every family driving one of those vehicles on every road in America through the decade. The 1966 safety legislation that followed was a response to an industry that had demonstrated it would not protect its customers without being legally required to do so. It was required because internal documents confirmed that the industry had possessed the knowledge, the technology, and the resources to do better, and had chosen not to. It symbolized a decade of performance over responsibility. From suspension geometries that snapped without warning, to brake systems inadequate for the engines above them, from push-button transmissions that selected the wrong gear, to fastback rooflines grafted onto platforms that could not support them, the 1960s produced both the most beautiful and the most powerful American automobiles ever built, and also a regulatory reckoning that permanently altered the relationship between the automotive industry and the government overseeing it. The lessons cost lives before they were learned. The legislation that followed was written by people who had read the internal documents and understood that the industry had known, had calculated, and had chosen accordingly. Sometimes the most important thing a car teaches you is what the company that built it believed your life was worth.